So before we start, I do have a second channel. So if you are interested in more content that isn't related to anime and manga, consider going over there and subscribing. Also, if you end up enjoying this video, consider leaving a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. So over the past couple of days, I've been kind of pondering, I've been thinking about what video that I should make next, what character I should talk about, what series I should talk about, and I was kind of up in the air on what I wanted to do until someone messaged me on Twitter and told me that you should talk about NAOYA ZENIN from Jujutsu Kaisen. And I thought about it for a second and I was like, you know what, that's actually a brilliant idea, because I don't really think I've talked about NAOYA specifically, and I do have a kind of different approach in terms of talking about him, not necessarily his character, but more so his importance, his value to the story. And I think the biggest kind of propellant for this conversation is more so the desire that NAOYA left in a lot of people. When you kind of got introduced to his character, when you started to get really comfortable with him, he was someone that was very alluring. He had this attention or this specific kind of perspective that we haven't really seen all too much of within Kaisen, so this enjoyment kind of flooded through, and a lot of people really wanted to see more of it, but of course we know how the story goes. He unfortunately meets his demise, and thus his character comes to a conclusion. He was only in the story for a short amount of time, but I do want to talk about why he was introduced here, why he was potentially killed off, and basically the importance, the value that he provides for this very kind of sophisticated point of Jujutsu Kaisen's narrative, and help kind of opening and building the future that would be the culling games and everything after it. So with that, let's begin.
The flavors are melting on my tongue.
I think NAOYA is a very one-to-one character, a very true character, a very simple character, right? To explain his personality, to explain his mental state, his thought process, or anything along those lines, is pretty much regurgitated information. It's basically all there within the story anyway. You get pretty much everything for the most part. You can obviously still have a conversation about it, but I think the routes that you can go down for it isn't all too opening or liberating, right? Instead, I wanted to kind of switch the conversation more so on his usage. Basically why Akutami put this character here within the story, instead of someone that could have been easily implemented into the main cast of characters or antagonists, or just someone that is a repeated character that obviously is very entertaining and enjoyable for a lot of people. Because of how influential NAOYA is, we have to be really careful. And the best place to start is obviously Shibuya. See, the reason why Shibuya is so impressive to myself is because an arc like that shouldn't necessarily work to such an extent. It's not to say that it's impossible, but the amount of attention of detail, the amount of character connection and emotional kind of response you have to have for these characters has to be extremely high for this arc to even work. And 100 chapters to build multiple emotional connections to characters, arguably less chapters, around 70 to 80, that's a very short amount of time. So we build all of this connection. We build the foundation and the pre-worked architecture for Shibuya, and then once we get to that point, the escalation or rise into peaks, into fights, into these cataclysmic climatic moments is super impressive. A lot of authors nowadays within the manga industry will tend to avoid doing something like this because it is extremely stressful, and the chances of it not working to such an extent as Shibuya did is very, very high. I would argue there is more of a chance to ruin kind of your whole story trying to do an arc like Shibuya compared to it actually succeeding and becoming one of your best or primary kind of focus points for the entirety of Jujutsu Kaisen, for the entirety of your narrative. But not only did Akutami do this, but they went a step further. They used Shibuya as a point of evolution. It actually kind of helps alleviate a lot of the difficulties as well, but to recontextualize a story that is still rather early within conception alongside a lot of other contenders, this is a pretty impressive thing to do. And you'll notice the shift in tone and atmosphere and characters and emotion, and everything's getting a little bit darker, a little bit more serious. And you can see this kind of bled or trickled through Shibuya itself. So what does this have to do with Naoya? The reason this is important to mention is because this is the backdrop for Naoya, not the setting that is Maki, not the setting that is the Zenin family, but Shibuya. Because once again, we are coming off such a cataclysmic climatic moment. We have to leave an impression, right? We have to showcase what the story is going to be from here on out. How has it changed? We just recontextualize everything. We just started to shift and change and mold this new aesthetic, this new atmosphere, this new emotion. Things are getting darker and more serious. So how do we showcase this? What perfect way to do it than a character that embodies basically all of those things? Naoya Zenin. But see, with Naoya, we cannot showcase him in the sense of over kind of grueling power. He can't be the most powerful individual to ever exist, because obviously there's characters that rival him, but we just introduced Yuta, and Yuta already eclipses kind of everyone within the story, so now you're trying to rival that. It's going to make him look really redundant. So instead, we have to play the emotional manipulation, the mental manipulation, and what better way to do that than with Maki and the Zenin family. I would argue that as great and kind of alluring Naoya's character is, the value that he provides for other characters for the showcase of the story changing and shifting into something a lot more sinister is easily one of the best sacrifices that was needed, because there was a pretty glaring problem after Shibuya. If we wanted to continue into much bigger and better things, now that Gojo has been sealed away, the power has to kind of escalate, and we have to get characters to a point where they can stand on their own with very incredibly powerful and scary individuals. So how do we do that, and where do we start? Well, we start with one of the weaker links that was going to have a very rough time catching up to her counterparts, catching up to her friends, and that is obviously none other than Maki. As incredible as Maki is as an individual prior her transformation, her kind of efforts to compete with Megumi or Yuji or Yuta, which Yuta does kind of bring in this whole new realm of power that no one else is really ever going to touch in that sense, we obviously have to bring her up. And Naoya is connected to that. So his story is paralleled with her story. Instead of just randomly being thrown in there, it's coupled with Maki's story. It's kind of the pillar, actually. The only reason that it kind of even works or has this intensity to it is because we put a face to the evil that is the Zenin family. Now, you could argue that Naoya is still just a product of what the Zenin family is, the way he was raised, the way he was manipulated, but still his morals, his beliefs, everything was shaped in the image of the Zenin family, and thus Naoya is the best representation of the Zenin family. Unfortunately, this showcases a couple of different things, right? Because this isn't necessarily Naoya's personality himself. The fact that he has been heavily warped, manipulated, and kind of indoctrinated for so many years as a child, and all of the abuse that he would have went through is more so a showcase of the Zenin family itself. You see this within his character. You see how prevalent it is. It's not something that's just kind of put on or a face that is overlaid. It is genuinely him through and through. Thus, automatically, there is this very prominent and dangerous connection between Maki and Naoya. And obviously that ripples out to the Zenin family. Alright, so what you're saying is that Naoya was basically used and sacrificed to showcase the brand new atmosphere and tone and kind of the emotional vulnerability that's going to become a main stage thing within Jujutsu Kaisen. Pretty much, yes. In all the best ways, Naoya is pretty much the best example, the best showcase of something that is very much needed. After Shibuya, we needed some sort of showcase of what's to come next, but not in the most life-changing, altering kind of situation that would recontextualize certain attributes of the story that just got recontextualized. Instead, we had to double down. We had to find something that was consistent, that hasn't necessarily been recontextualized, and to play upon it in a much more deeper and darker and authentic manner. And the perfect upon perfect characters for this was none other than Maki. I honestly think Shibuya, Maki's character, and Naoya have been conceptualized since the very beginning. That these were always going to be in succession of one another, because as important as Naoya is, Naoya also only thrives as much as he does because of Maki, because of the Zenin family, because of what we know of the Zenin family, which has been majorly showcased through Maki, someone that has been at the demise of the Zenin family. This altercation between them is very thought-provoking, right? Not only for Maki as an individual, which I've made separate videos for her and is an incredible showcase for the new character that she's becoming, but even for Naoya as well, because within their fight, you actually get to see a slither of his true personality, a slither of who he is as an individual, not the Zenin family byproduct that he's been created from, but himself. It's very minuscule, it's very small, but within these moments of desperation, within him reflecting and seeing Maki and the emotional kind of overload that happens within himself, you see these very true moments or the true face of Naoya. And it's someone that is a lot more complex than you could ever imagine. Someone that is more than the trauma and the manipulation and the abuse that he faced as a child. Unfortunately, you see a harsh reality very quickly, doubling down on showcasing this new dark atmosphere and authenticity. You see the brutality of what the Zenin family does, especially to their children, because even though you see these slices of Naoya's true personality, it is so heavily intertwined with his manipulation, with his kind of core emotion and his core being, that they can't become untangled. There is so much inherent confusion. It's kind of saddening when you put it in perspective like that. Naoya could have been a rather caring individual. He could have been just like any other child, but put within the hands of the family, he grew an ego. He grew a complex. He thought of himself as some sort of being that was higher or more powerful than anyone else, yet time and time again, even himself, he realizes that he's belittled, that he can't live up to these said people. Couldn't live up to Yuta. He couldn't live up to the child flashback that we got with him looking at Toji, and he couldn't live up to Maki, someone that is a reflection of Toji within that time period, but ended up being herself. This is quite literally Naoya, and this was probably the best way to showcase just how serious Jujutsu Kaisen is getting, especially when this is all tunneled towards the culling games, even more so when you see how much devastation and destruction and death that Maki actually brings. The Zenin family is wiped from existence. This is a whole bloodline that is killed off by Maki's own hands. To me, this sacrifice of the Zenin family was the main purpose, the main goal, right? Not only do you put Maki through an evolution and get rid of a family that is so toxic and abusive and stuck within their ways, but you also need an individual in the middle to be the face of it, for it to be the highest intensity that it can be. And Naoya is the utmost perfect individual, a product of the Zenin family that has been molded in their image, and someone that has so much ego behind them. And just to go a step further and double down on it, even when you see his true face, his true emotions, his true thoughts, they are so entangled with this Zenin preset or molding that it is dangerously corrupt, and that it cannot be saved, it cannot be salvaged. In my mind, this is how Akutami envisioned Naoya as an individual, as someone that is a tool, not only for Akutami to implement the destruction of the Zenin family and to evolutionize Maki as an individual, but also within the story's narrative itself, a tool for the Zenin family, a tool for the higher ups to use, a puppet to become the next big thing to puppeteer the next generation. Yet his death, his demise, his fall is probably one of the most important within the story. It symbolizes the fall of the Zenin family. It symbolizes the discontinuation of the abuse and manipulation that Maki and Naoya went through, but it also showcases what's to come. It puts Maki on a very high pedestal. It showcases the brutality of these families, of the politics within Kaizen's world. After Shibuya, we needed something personal. We needed something that we could connect to, that we could kind of breathe within and focus on one singular individual with so much intensity, and we got that. As much as Naoya was so enjoyable to witness every single week and made for a unpredictable approach, he was ultimately sacrificed for the better. Keeping him around, I would argue, does nothing for the story. It would belittle what Maki and Naoya have both gone through. It would completely go against Maki's thought process and her emotions currently, slaughtering the entirety of the Zenin family, believing the face of it, Naoya, still alive. It would also be a massive spit in Naoya's image as well. As someone that is so ego-driven, someone that cannot be untangled from his past, you would leave him in a position of limbo. You can't change him. You can't evolve him. You can't have him feel guilt or be forgiven. So where does he go? What does he do? He's not going to overpower Maki. He's not going to overpower Yuta. He's not going to get an altercation with Sukuna or potentially even Megami. So what good would there really be keeping him within this story? It would start to belittle his character. It would start to have him trickle and fade away into obscurity because he's just not that relevant. But within the moment that he was played upon, his personality was vivid, it was valuable, it was empowering, it was so intoxicating, and seeing that clash with Maki was such a beautiful experience. So having him end there, I say, is the best approach to Naoya's character, to once again symbolize the death of the Zenin family, both literally and within the face of Naoya as well. Could there be an opportunity where he comes back as a vengeful spirit? By all means, yes. I still think that's kind of redundant at this point. We're very much past that power level, but if the vengeful spirit does actually give him a massive boost in that sense, by all means, sure, why not? But for the most part, I value Naoya very heavily, and a lot of people kind of reach these two conclusions. Is he a wasted character, wasted potential, or was he as intended? I think you can take the route of wasted potential down so many different avenues, but for Naoya, I don't actually think it is. I think he has more potential, more value with what his story actually provides us as readers, what it showcases, the atmosphere, the tone, the shift in characters, and how much it actually provides, and him being the biggest introduction to that. He is the face of all of this change. And just because he's reached the end of his value does not mean that he has wasted potential. To me, he is very purposeful. There is intent, there is a thought process, there is a pattern of his usage. It's clear, it's precise. So something that's just randomly thrown in there. It's not wasted that he was killed off. It was purposeful. It was for a reason. Keeping him around, you dwindle his character down bit by bit. You break that value. You disrespect that value. It makes it almost redundant or pointless. You have to take an entirely different approach to recontextualizing Maki as a character. You no longer can do the same thing that we have had. You'd have to change the approach to the culling games. You'd have to find something else to implement the severity that Naoya and Maki actually gave us. I would say that there is so much more difficulty with his character being alive and playing upon that quote-unquote wasted potential than the value that he actually gave us. It's fine if you want him to be alive or want him to return as a vengeful spirit. You're not wrong for thinking like that. There's no right or wrong answer here. But to say Naoya is wasted potential, I think, is a little bit disingenuous. It's not an inherently bad thing if you do think it, but just think of how much he's already provided us, how incredible his character was, and the purpose or the true role that he was actually playing. Do we need to disrespect that anymore? Do we need to continue it on or drag it out longer than it has to be? I think it was the perfect length, and it was conceptualized alongside Shibuya and everything else, all in like one big beautiful package. There was always going to be a very crucial moment after Shibuya, and Akatami played it perfectly with Naoya as he was sacrificed for the better. Endtime. So with that, welcome to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. I greatly appreciate it. Please let me know how you feel about Naoya. I know a lot of people are upset that his character's gone. Do you think he's wasted potential? Do you think the purpose that he had was intended and was always meant to be this slither of story? Or do you think there might have been more there? Or do you think he'd have maybe more value being alive within the story currently? Maybe you just really love his character, but I would definitely love to hear your thoughts, so let me know down below. But with that, I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Drink plenty of water, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.